like the number of times that Elon has tweeted and screwed up one of my videos.
Five, four, three, two, one, zero.
Listen to this. In his most recent interview, Elon Musk says that we can have a fully sustainable energy economy, but the biggest limiting factor is...
And it's those three things: solar, wind, stationary battery pack, electric vehicles. So then, like, what are the limiting factors on progress? The limiting factor really will be battery cell production. So that's gonna really be the fundamental rate driver. And then whatever the slowest element of the whole lithium-ion battery cells supply chain, from mining and the many steps of refining to ultimately creating a battery cell and putting it into a pack, that will be the limiting factor on progress towards sustainability.
So who better to talk to about this than the limiting factor on YouTube? Jordan and I met briefly during Cyber Rodeo. Here's our interview. You live in Ohio.
That's right.
Okay, where at?
It's in the middle of Egypt.
Okay, why are you there?
Well, family's here. This is where I grew up. And I was like, well, I can live anywhere now that I have a YouTube channel. And one of the best ways to increase your happiness, supposedly, is to live near your family. And I've found that that's the case.
I met you very briefly in Texas. You were there too for Cyber Rodeo. So first, let's just get the reaction to Cyber Rodeo out of the way.
I spent most of my focus was on talking to the employees and getting information that I didn't really have a chance to enjoy everything that was going on. I mean, to me, it was just like an obstacle course in my way as I was trying to check out the machine. So yeah, I just remember I needed to get a drink of water at one point, and it took me like 45 minutes to get a drink of water. So then every time you try to go somewhere, there's people that want to stop and talk to you, which I love talking to people. So yeah, it was a pretty awesome experience. It's one of the top experiences of my life, at least, just those 3 days, right, interacting with the community. And then the Cyber Rodeo itself, it's kind of a historic moment, not a major historical moment. Maybe it'll turn out to be, but yeah, Elon throws a good party. And the Gigafactory was massive, and it was quite an event.
Yeah, I mean, what were you surprised by on the inside?
I guess my first impression, and I said this in the panel interview with Sandy Monroe, it's a gorgeous factory. Mm-hmm. I've worked in factories before, and it feels like you're going into a prison. They don't want to let any outside views because they don't want anybody to be distracted. It's like you're just supposed to have your nose on the grindstone all day. But that thing, you walk in, broad staircase, massive windows in the front, so you get this panoramic view of Austin. That's just gorgeous. So it was a really attractive factory. Everything was clean, organized. I'm a little bit OCD, high anxiety, so everything was like nicely organized. It didn't feel cluttered. Yeah, it seemed like somebody put some thought into that building. Yes. So that was my overall impression.
It was interesting. I think I was definitely surprised, and so was Warren Redlick when we met you at Clive, and we found out that, you actually don't have this crazy background that we all expected you to have. So tell me, like, how did you even get into, who you are today?
Fake it till you make it. No, it's basically, I'll put a finer point on it than that. Galileo Russell, about 2.5 years ago, he did a video on what he was expecting from Battery Day, and just he was doing his own research, connecting dots, and it was really interesting what he put together. And so I started looking into it. And as I looked into it, I was like, oh, I don't think that's quite right. So I'm going to put my opinion out there. And so I did. People gave me feedback, said, no, that's not quite right. And then, so each video I just tried to be less stupid. And I just put myself out there. People gave me feedback. And then I just upped my knowledge base from there. My degree is actually in management and organizational psychology, but I've always had an interest in science and technology. So yeah, I'm glad to be able to do this full time now.
I was going to say, are you full time?
Mm-hmm. Just as of about 3 months ago, I moved back to the US from New Zealand because I was in New Zealand for about 15 years. And yeah, everything lined up. Everything was pointing back to the US, so I came back here.
What were you doing in New Zealand?
A little bit of everything. Like we're getting into my life history now. So when I went to college, I lived at home with my parents and I worked all the way through and I went to a local university. So I graduated with no debt, but I didn't have that full college experience that a lot of people have. So I was like, my last year of university, I was like, okay, it's my turn to do like splash out a bit and go do something a little bit out there. So I started learning about New Zealand, and you could get a 1-year working holiday visa there,
Mm.
and it's safe. People spoke English, and there's so much to see there. So I picked New Zealand, went there, and I ended up skipping my flight home, is the short story. Working in bars and restaurants, I did that for a few years, and then I worked for the tax department at a national level there for about 13 years, doing a little bit of everything from IT to trademark management.
I've always wondered what it would be like to live in another country. Is it, I mean, you must have liked it. You stayed for a while.
Yeah, it's a lot of the part of the reason why I did that wasn't just for the adventure, but I wanted to test all my assumptions, because what I felt like in the US is um, basically the same thing that people are experiencing now, where it felt like people treated opinion like truth and truth like opinion. And everything that we're seeing today, to me, is just what I was saying 20 years ago on steroids. And so I was like, I need to get at a deeper core truth here. And the best way to do that is just to question every assumption about my culture. What's the best way to do that? Go travel. It's kind of like the particle accelerator approach. And yeah, it worked out well. And um, in terms of the experience itself, like the first few years in a country, you kind of fall in love with it and you get obsessed with it. And then over time, you kind of develop a more balanced point of view and you realize, okay, it's, you know, there's positives and negatives to the US and New Zealand. So I'm happy to live in either. A lot of people were like wondering, why would you leave New Zealand? And it's, yeah, every place you go, there's positives and negatives. I mean, some of them, I don't know. I've only lived in 2 countries, so maybe there are countries that are actually uh, worse to live in. Definitely countries like, say, North Korea, etc.
Yeah.
But on the whole, I think a lot of countries are a mixed bag,
Mhm.
and you can cut yourself and make yourself a little life wherever you live.
So how long have you been back in Ohio?
Uh, 4 months now. It was like the 7th of January that I came back.
So you were doing limiting factor in New Zealand.
Yeah, I actually started it right before COVID. I think it was middle or late January of 2020. And yeah, I got obsessed with making videos, and then COVID hit, and I was like, perfect. I mean, I know COVID was terrible for a lot of people, but for me, I was like, okay, I can work from home and I can focus more of my time on actually doing the channel.
Right.
Because by that point, after 10 years in the public service, I was kind of over dealing with bureaucracy. I'm glad I had the experience because it taught me a lot about the way government works and why organizations fail and why Tesla, for instance, is so unique.
Break down for me some of the most exciting things about Tesla, specifically with your, battery knowledge.
Overall, 10,000-foot view. Tesla has gone from a company that doesn't manufacture battery cells to manufacturing the most advanced battery cells in the world, and doing that in a period of a few short years with technologies that a lot of people thought were impossible. Like, for instance, or not impossible, but they would be at least like 5 years off. Like they plan on manufacturing their battery cells with a dry battery electrode. So there's this whole bundle of technologies that go into the 4680 battery cells that researchers and commercial organizations have been pushing towards for years, but nobody had quite cracked it. Well, Tesla managed to crack multiple things all at the same time and produce something that's the optimal battery cell for vehicles. And not only that, a lot of other companies are talking about doing what Tesla was starting to do like 5 to 10 years ago with Panasonic in Nevada. But they haven't done it yet. Whereas you have Tesla, not only they're working with a cell supplier slash manufacturer in-house, they've started making their own battery cells and putting them into packs that they've made directly into a vehicle in the same factory. And I don't see anybody else doing that for at least another 5 years. So it's pretty astounding.
Yeah.
Go from nothing to far beyond everybody else within just a few years.
Right. But are we surprised?
Well, it's in a certain sense, no, you're not surprised given the organizational culture of Tesla, because that's what it all stems from. But at the same time, it's pretty astounding that if you just do a proper job of organizing people and give them the tools that they need and give them the freedom they need to innovate, what people can do if you really set them loose. And that's what's most exciting for me about Tesla, is that culture and the way that they're changing how things are done. I hope it spills out to the rest of culture. Yeah.
Right. What, when you were first like making videos, you said that, you know, you obviously maybe made some errors or didn't have quite the depth of knowledge that you have now. How were you able to cultivate that, since it's, you know, something that's not your background? Do you have a mentor?
What happened was, like, the first couple of videos, people gave me feedback, and it was just like your average Joe, people interested in batteries. And YouTube viewers are extremely savvy. If you give them a topic that's has some meat to it, they have some really good insights. So I took that feedback on board, and then that allowed me to raise the quality of my videos to the point where, you know, I could contact researchers and then I go, oh, you're actually, you know, you actually really want to learn this stuff. And people who are curious themselves, they tend to be attracted to other people who are curious about things, and they want to lend you a hand and they want to share the knowledge that's in their head. So that's what I did. I just kind of moved up the rung, and then within about 9 months, I was interviewing Shirley Mung on my channel, and she's one of the, from my perspective, one of the best battery researchers in the world and a fantastic communicator.
Wow.
Mhm.
Tell me how you came up with the name, The Limiting Factor.
It's what I always find with technology is that I wanted to do something different than all the other tech channels you see, which are like, oh, let's get pumped, we're going to have solid state batteries next year. Or like, did you ever watch that show Beyond 2000 when you were younger? It was like on the Discovery Channel, and then say, okay, we're going to have these, you know, this flying car or that thing, and it never panned out. I think 95% of those things never actually happened. So I'm like, well, what actually prevents a technology from hitting a commercial reality? What gets in the way? What are the limiting factors? Now that can be both with the technology itself, why it actually isn't commercially feasible, or why it's actually difficult to scale it up. So they're two separate problems. One's the base technology itself and its commercial viability, and the other is, you know, producing millions of X thing. So that's what I try to focus on. I don't try to pump people up about technology. I think it's actually more interesting to dig into the realities of the technology rather than just to hype things up. And tech porn is probably the best way to put it. I try not to do that, but it does, when you start digging into these things, it turns into that anyways. People like, they get more interested and they learn things.
What have you learned for what you said over 2 years now, making videos about this? I know that's such a loaded question. I'm sorry. What have you learned?
It does ignite something in my brain, which is that everybody I've interacted with, everybody still has something to learn. And I try to be as accurate as possible with my YouTube channel. But one thing to keep in mind is nobody is an expert. Well, you know, there's people we call experts, but all of us are constantly learning. I think when people see somebody who has a YouTube channel that covers tech or something like that, they want to try to view that as gospel. But I'm as much as I try to make things as accurate as possible, I still occasionally make mistakes, or there's another side to something that I didn't appreciate or realize. If you're waiting to learn from somebody who doesn't make mistakes, you're going to be waiting a long time to learn. So just assume that the people who are sharing and teaching things with you stand on their shoulders and learn everything that you can from. But do keep in mind that all of us are constantly learning.
interesting. Like when I first started making videos about Starlink and then kind of more SpaceX stuff, I'm like, am I ever going to run out of content? And I don't think I ever will. There's something always changing. There's always stuff in development. So do you find the same in your kind of niche that like, you're like, you can go, there's no lack of content for you?
Yeah, exactly. And that was one of the first things that when I first started the YouTube channel, I was like, I'm gonna make 1 or 2 videos and that's gonna be it. But then what happens is you focus on something and it expands and it branches out. So you do video on one thing and you have to actually learn about a few different things to make that video. And then you realize I could make a video on those 3 different things. So it branches and spiders out to where after you've made a dozen videos, all of a sudden there's 100 topics that you could cover. And it's a target-rich environment. It's always news. There's always something. Like the number of times that Elon has tweeted and screwed up one of my videos, and I've had to go through and rewrite it, rescript it, re-record it. It's just, it happens every couple of months where I just have to rewrite something because the ground has shifted because of something Elon's tweeted or said at on an earnings call.
What are you hoping to see within like the next 5 years in terms of, battery tech?
I think that tech, where we have it now, is good enough to achieve all the ends we need to achieve with sustainable energy. It's just a matter of driving down costs and pulling the materials out of the ground quick enough to make that happen. And I think that's why Elon is now talking about his master plan and extreme scaling, because that is the next limiting factor is how quickly can we permit these mines, extract those materials from the ground and get them into vehicles or get them into energy storage, etc. I don't think people quite realize how much material is required. Tesla will sign an agreement for, say, 100,000 tons of material. And that sure sounds like a lot. And it is. That's enough to, double the supply of nickel-based batteries that we have, for instance. But we need to not only double, we need to triple. We need to grow by 10, 15, 20 times. And even that might be conservative. So it's literally going to require mountains of materials. So that's where the focus should be now, is raw materials. Now, it's not to say that growth is like going to stop, but it's going to become incrementally more difficult to get the materials we need, and it's going to slow down the transition to sustainable energy if we don't start putting a focus on these raw materials. And I think it takes a whole of society approach because it's such a challenging problem to solve. I think we're going to see increasing energy density, increasing charge rates over the next few years. So vehicles will get more efficient. But I think that's probably the main thing people are looking for is increased charge rates. And I think that will slowly happen over the next few years because there's lots of different aspects to charging. One is the actual output of the charging station itself. Another is having the cooling system in place in a battery to be able to rapidly charge the battery without degrading it. And one is the ability of that battery cell to accept that charge rate. And I think the new 4680 battery cell and Tesla's new structural pack, it looks like there's new cooling in there. It should be able to increase the rate that we should be able to charge these batteries. So they just need to up the charge rate at the charging stations.
Is upping the range also paramount, or is that not as like important as some people might think?
I think increasing range is important, but it's a matter of, it's a matter of priorities. There's several important things that need to happen. One is we need to get more cars on the road that are electric and transition the world to sustainable energy. But we have unlimited wants and limited supply of raw materials and battery cells. So with those constraints in mind, the best thing to do is just provide enough range to cover most people's needs and then use the extra battery cells to put more vehicles on the road.
What are more roadblocks that are preventing us from mass adoption of EVs?
To me, it's just production. It seems like there's plenty of demand out there.
Mm-hmm.
I think demand will keep increasing as people, like when as I said, I live in the middle of nowhere, and when I back my car up, it sounds like a UFO, and everybody in their head like, what the heck is that? And then some people come up and talk to me like, hey, you want to go for a ride? And then I gun it and just like, oh my God, just like screaming and laughing. And after they experienced that, they're like, I did not think something that was electric could do something like that.
Yeah.
Or battery powered. So they're really blown away by the experience. And it's just like they say, it's like being in a spaceship.
Mhm.
So I think the more people that are exposed to it, the more people are going to want them.
Right.
People are going to, when people start saying that fossil fuel vehicles are a dead end, there's going to be a dip, and people are going to stop buying fossil fuel based vehicles, and they're going to wait to buy an electric car because
Right.
you want to buy something that's depreciating that quick. People are, when the economic realities of electric vehicles hits, and I think it already is with high fuel prices, it's going to force people into electric vehicles, because ultimately, if you have a pragmatic solution to a problem, people will get on that boat.
For people that are not super familiar with the 4680, I mean, why is this so groundbreaking?
A lot of people assume that there's some magic to the 4680 battery cell. And as I said earlier, there is a lot of great technology that's stuffed in that battery cell. I don't know if we necessarily needed that battery cell to transition to the world to a sustainable energy, but it certainly accelerates it because it's less capital, less materials required to build these factories. It helps us leverage the scaling and scale more efficiently. But there's other companies like CATL and BYD that are doing great things with battery cells and the way that they package them. BYD, for instance, they have a structural battery as well, just like Tesla does. They've just done it a different way. I guess if I was to pinpoint it, it would be it's of huge benefit to Tesla. It puts them in control of their own destiny and allows them to scale more quickly with fewer constraints.
Who would be your bucket list interview for your channel?
Oh man, that's a good question. The thing is, a lot of the people that I'd want to interview and the things that I want to interview them about, a lot of my questions get deep into things that are trade secret in nature. So they wouldn't be able to answer my questions. So if I would love to interview Elon, but, and I have a list of questions if he ever wants to be interviewed by me. There's people that I keep in mind that I'd like to talk to. Sandy Monroe is somebody that I plan on interviewing. I have a list of questions for him as well. It's just a matter of getting around to it because I think he would be up for it. Detroit's only about a 2-hour drive away from here, and Monroe and Associates has invited me up there before. I was getting ready to go up there, and then Austin hit, and I was like, oh, heck, I'll just see you up there. And then I ended up on stage with Sandy. So, but I do want to interview him one-on-one at some point and ask him about things that he would be really interested in and provide unique insights like supersonic vertical takeoff and landing electric jets. But yeah, as far as Elon goes, I'd want to know about this VTOL, just certain characteristics about it so I could maybe make a model of it or take a guess at what he has planned. I want to know about his materials team and the materials that they're working on, because in the past, he said that the materials, they have a lot of materials in their skunk works. And I'd really love to know what those are, because when you have a new material, it opens up the design space and allows you to do completely new and different things.
Right.
Yeah. Like for instance, the Model S, I think one of the important factors that allowed them to, hit these massive acceleration was a certain type of metal connector. I think it was called Inconel. That allowed that to happen. Without that material, that would have been more difficult. Like the Starship, the stainless steel, the Giga castings, that's a special alloy. So the materials team plays a really silent but pivotal role in opening up new things for Tesla.
Yeah, was it cool to see sort of the Giga castings, like if from the inside in person?
Yeah, it was fun just to tap on them and just see how it felt. Like I looked at it and I was like, God, I could pick this thing up. It's absolutely massive. You tap on it, it just sounds like like a thick aluminum can. One thing I was really impressed by was the fact that they're not stopping. Like they went into gigacasting and they're now able to produce their vehicle bodies in about half the time as say VW. And they're not stopping there. When I was there, I noticed that, and you interviewed somebody and you picked up on it as well, that they're implementing an entirely new cooling system to push the limits of those machines even further. So I was happy to see that in your video, because it was kind of double confirmation of the conversation I had with.
The way that they do things is how everyone should do things, right?
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, it's like Sandy Monroe's been talking about this stuff for like decades. And not only is Tesla doing it, but they're kicking it up a notch. They developed a special alloy that improves the gigacasting process and the end product.
I mean, I think it's really awesome that you've been able to take it full time and kind of, obviously become an expert in this. Anyone can become an expert if they just take the time to learn, and the internet provides you with resources abound, right? So
it's all out there. And I would encourage anybody who wants to start a YouTube channel doing something similar to what I'm doing. We need it, because I have like hundreds of ideas for videos. And there's this bottleneck of throughput where you have to decode information, have it make sense in your brain, encode it into a script, and then you have to produce that script into something with images and laid out really carefully for people. And I could probably produce a script every 4 or 5 days, but once you layer in everything on top of it, community management, etc., I can only put a video out like every couple of weeks for deep dive videos. So there's definitely openings there for people to do similar things. And I'd encourage it, because it takes a community to follow what Tesla's doing. They have so much going on that one person simply can't cover it.
yeah, that was one thing that I was thinking about while we were in Austin, is that, because like someone was like, oh, you should get a hold of their press department. And I'm like, what press department? Like, it's so interesting that you have just everyday people, covering all of these developments with SpaceX and Tesla. It's like you don't really get much of that in the mainstream media. And people really rely on YouTubers to gather the content and be, up to date and the go-to source. I just think it's fascinating that we are in charge in a way of being the source. I mean, I've worked in TV news for 8 years, so like we have, local news that we cover every day. But like for this, it's so cool to me that it's really up to people online like you and I to kind of bring news to people.
Exactly. We're performing a really important niche role. And I'm like, not just for Tesla, but every topic on YouTube. There's things that just typical news, it has a specific purpose. It's to keep people abreast and apace of what's going on in the world. But if you actually want to dig into something and understanding it at a deeper level, you need YouTube channels digging into this stuff, because a lot of it's kind of niche. You can't, you couldn't do an entire, channel on TV covering what I'm covering.
No.
There just wouldn't be that much interest in it. But so, because I have like 80,000 people following my channel, that's not enough to sustain everything that would be required to do that. So it takes somebody with a specific mindset that has a purpose and a passion for something.
Right.
And then people kind of pool around them for all these niche topics. And there's thousands or even hundreds of thousands of topics that need to be covered like that. So yeah, I feel I'm fortunate. I'm glad to be around at this time and to be able to fill that role for people.